Hello and welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us. My name is Jonas Ronegard from JROTools, and today we have Niels and Robin from CR Division with us to do some portfolio reviews. I'd also like to introduce Gregory Robb, the CEO from CR Division, and I'll let him take over from here. Thank you.
I appreciate you, Jonas. Thank you so very much for the introductory. Again, my name is Gregory Robb. I'm the COO for Sierra Division. We have the privilege today of being able to provide some portfolio reviews for the Mr. Great and Powerful Jonas Ronegard's community. And so we are very much looking forward to this opportunity. Our artists, Robin and Niels, I'm going to let them introduce themselves here in just a brief moment, are going to go through some selected portfolios that were submitted to us, go through, provide some feedback. We hope that we've selected a good blend of works from everybody, so this way we can provide as much generalized feedback as possible while also still providing benefit to the artists who submitted the work themselves. And so without further ado, Robin, would you mind if I started with you, my friend? You can go ahead and introduce yourself.
For sure. Let me just share my screen real quick. So hi everyone, my name is Mariančík. I'm 3D artist at CR Division. If you want, you can check out my portfolio on ArtStation. I have some personal stuff here, some stuff I did at CR Division, like this Rabbitor here, or some stuff I did for Counter-Strike 2. And also this motorcycle here, which is related to the upcoming course at CR Division Academy. And now I will give it up for Niels.
Hello everyone, my name is Niels. I'm an environment artist at Sierra Division, and I'm a little sick today, so my voice might cut off or I might have a little voice stutter. But we're trying our best to keep that at a bare minimum. I've been an environment artist at Sierra Division for around almost 3 years now, and let me share my screen as well. This is my portfolio right here. I mainly focus, as you can see, on more realistic looking assets, as well as the underground bunker, which is an environment. And then I also have the learning content toolbox, just like Robin. And this one focuses on realistic textures. I'll give it back to Rob. I don't know who's going to start the portfolio reviews, but I'm sure we're all very excited for that.
Yes, absolutely. And so without further ado, Robin, would you like to kick us off? You have the mirror board ready here. We can go over some portfolios.
All right. I'll just give me a moment to share my screen.
Of course. And while Robin's pulling that up, just to explain here real quick, we'll be going back and forth between the two artists as they're going through portfolios. If anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, you're ready to shoot those over to us in the YouTube chat, that's fine. I'll do my best to try to address those, at least in an orderly fashion, as best we can, but the primary focus here is going to be on the portfolios. Didn't mean to interrupt you, Robin. Just wanted to let the folks know as far as what to expect, but you're good to kick us off.
Fine. Thank you, Greg. So first of all, I want to apologize because definitely butcher all of those names. But my first person is Harry Dutt. And so first thing I thought when I saw your portfolio is that I'm not really sure what kind of an artist you are. So I would say that there is such a thing as too much of a generalist, and that all of the different disciplines in art, for example, I saw some character art, some props, environment, some VFX, and even other disciplines in your portfolio. And I would say that all of these are really, really hard to master, even if you just focus on one of them. So this is definitely something I would recommend for you, is to pick one and keep it as a main focus for you. And this is really something that I see quite often in many different portfolio, is that people focus on everything. And I absolutely understand this, because I myself am exactly the same way. I want to do everything because I just enjoy to do everything. But if you want to get really good at something, it's just really not possible to do it while doing everything. So if I was to pick something, I think that what was best in your portfolio are those stylized materials in Substance Designer. I think those are pretty nice. So having said that, I think that less is more. So you have 109 posts on your ArtStation, and some of them are really old and even 5 years. So I would delete at least like 80% of all the artworks and really just keep all the best stuff that you think is gonna represent you best there. I also noticed that you have this certificate here, and I would say that this is pretty unusual, and I don't really see that having it in the portfolio itself. So I think perhaps it would be better to move it in the About section right here and just keep it there as text. Perhaps even better place for it would be your LinkedIn profile. Now for the portfolio posts themselves, what I noticed is that you don't really use all the resolution you can. So if you have a free ArtStation profile, you can go up to 922 times 920 pixels. And this is pretty decent resolution. But if you see this screenshot here, this is on my 4K monitor, and you can see that all of these posts are really, really small. So it's really hard to see them. So really, I would recommend just go as high as you can in terms of resolution. Another thing I noticed that you do quite often in your portfolio posts is that you just grab screens from the DCC software. And I would say that this is not really a good thing to do because you want to always present your work in the best light. So doing just a gray box screenshot is not really great. So what you want to do is basically this first image here looks like a render, but at the same time it looks like screenshot again because I can see some of the indicators here. So what you want to do is you want to do proper renders, do them from different angles, and really try to play with it, and really try to show all of your stuff in the best light. And also, I would recommend that don't post like half finished work, only post stuff that is like properly finished. For example, if you're doing a game asset, you would want it to have it optimized, textured, and rendered properly. I also noticed that in your About You, you have some grammatical errors. And I understand that English is probably your second language. But nowadays, what you can do is you can just take what you wrote, paste it in GPT, and tell it to correct everything. And then when it's corrected, it's gonna look that much more professional. One more thing I noticed is that your profile picture, you are using the uh, one of your older artwork that I noticed is 5 years old. And I would say that this one really doesn't have correct anatomy, and I would say that it probably doesn't represent you right now. So I would really update it with either something random. For example, I just have a cat here. Or if you want some of your artwork there, just put something more recent there. Okay, so this is pretty much everything. So you have some nice pieces in your portfolio. I think that the stylized materials, as I mentioned, might be your strongest pieces, but you are really treating your portfolio just as a journal and or a blog where you are posting everything. So I would really try to reduce it a lot, and I think this will help it a lot. So this is everything for me, and now I'm going to give it back to Niels.
Thank you, Robin. Let me share my screen real quick right here. I'm also very sorry that I'm gonna butcher a lot of these names, but I'm reviewing Aushman, and from a first glance of his portfolio, I can tell that he's an environment artist that also does props. As you can see here, he's a 3D environment artist, so that checks out. And a lot of the feedback that Robin gave, especially with the older works, also applies to this portfolio and in a lot of portfolios in general. It's almost as if you're getting attached to older projects. And one thing that someone told me that about a portfolio is that you're only as strong as your weakest post, which is definitely valid. In this case, your strongest part in your portfolio are the first two environments, and the contrast between your older works, for example, this one, which is 4 years old, is getting a little too big. It doesn't really reflect your skill anymore. So you want to try and sell yourself in the best way possible. And I think if you only kept a couple of these, for example, these two environments, it would make your portfolio look that much more appealing, right? One thing that I've noticed as well is that your presentation and thumbnails are not always consistent. What I mean by that is, especially the thumbnails here, you're using the Unreal Engine logo with a soft opacity, but then you're using one at full opacity. You have some designer materials, which are very nice. But then for this one, you're not using the designer logo as well here. And you're putting your link on one thumbnail and the rest doesn't have it. And something very nitpicky. Let me just try to get the brush. Well, the brush is gone, I guess. But this logo, the designer logo, is kind of bigger than the other one. So just try to stay consistent, especially with your thumbnails, because thumbnails is what people click on the first thing that they see your portfolio, right? Then to your artwork, I'm going to focus on the overgrown factory for now. I have a couple of notes. The main one being the concept that you shared here is a lot more vibrant, right? The colors are a lot more vibrant, the leading lines as well. So I made a little overpaint. So this is the original. So if you compare it to the concept, you can see that it's way less saturated. It looks a bit more depressing. So if you just put it in Photoshop, you can do some adjustment layers. You can play with the hue saturation and then try to apply the same thing to your post-processing, right? So this is a GIF image. If it wants to load, you can see the before and after. It gets a little bit closer to the concept. Your shadows are getting a little colder because right here, your shadows don't have that blue hue as compared to the concept. So you want to try to take a render, put it in Photoshop, and then try to do the same thing in your post-processing settings. You can create a color LUT, a lookup table if you want to. You can change the hue, the contrast, and the saturation in there as well. The concept also has a lot more rest areas. With rest areas, I'm talking about this area in the middle here. With your variation, it gets a little too busy and it has quite a lot of clutter, and I'm getting lost in what the actual focal point is, as well as the background. You're kind of losing the leading lines to this main orange building here. As you can see here, the yellow lines are all kind of pointing towards this orange building, whereas your variation or your version that you recreated doesn't really have that same effect. So my eyes are kind of going all over the place. Then for your assets as well, so I did one asset and one environment. I picked the stove. The first thing I noticed was that you have quite a bit of faceting here. I get that you're trying to make a game-ready asset, but an asset in a game environment would be quite big. So don't be afraid to use a little bit more polygons, especially where you need them. So this is the silhouette. As you can see here, the faceting is quite visible. Some variations in stains would help sell the dirtiness and the realism of this asset just a tiny bit more. Right now, it's quite overall. You have some very white spots, some almost rust-looking elements to it as well. So try to get some stains in there, some breakup, and localize it as well. So it gets closer to the actual burner in the circular pattern as compared to pretty much everywhere. And then suddenly in the middle, there's no stains. The same applies to the splashboard. Everything is super dirty, super grimy, but the splashboard somehow doesn't have a ton of grime on there. I would expect it to match the wear and dirtiness of the other parts as well. Feel free to also add some storytelling elements. This can make it a lot more interesting for the viewer to watch your renders. This could be, for example, this one here. Someone tried to clean it, but gave up in the middle because it was too dirty, for example. So you could add some wipes and stuff. That would be very nice. And I don't know if it's the render or the actual texture, but there's quite a lot of noise in here. Again, I don't know if it's the texture or the render, but in some parts here on the back as well, it gets quite noisy. And you have this high frequency height details in here that are also on these parts. Try to avoid it and rather put it in the albedo or the roughness instead of the height map. Geo-wise, you could put some dents in there, and if you don't have it in the geo, you can simply put a height map, blur it out, and try to get some more interesting dents in there. Because this asset is super worn, I would expect it to have some dents or some imperfections in the geo as well. Then some stuff you can add as well, as I see a lot of rust dripping, but I don't really see any peeling paint, right? So the paint is the protective layer, and then you have the rust underneath, and only then would the rust bleed over the paint. So a little bit of peeling paint, exposing the dirty metal, oxidized metal, the rusty parts, would help sell the realism that much more. So overall, it's nice to see the progress that you've made throughout the years, but I would scrap some older projects, like Robin said as well. You have, and only leave the pieces that are up to date, because that's what's going to reflect your skill. You've got some stronger environment pieces, especially the last two, but the other asset kind of bring down the quality of your portfolio. And again, keep in mind, you're only as strong as your weakest work. And that was it for this portfolio. I'm going to bring it back to Robin.
All right, thank you, Niels. Let me get back to the mirror board. And so my next person is Iraida. And first thing I noticed is that your ArtStation is missing the header here, which is a minor thing, but I feel like this is going to make your portfolio feel a little bit more complete, and it's nice to have there. Another thing I noticed is that in your latest post, it's very minor, but I noticed that this font here feels a little bit unbalanced. It might be geometrically balanced, like in the Adobe Illustrator or the software used, but here it optically feels a little bit like the birdie is moving a bit too much to the right. So I would really nudge it to the left by just a few pixels, and perhaps even the space here, I would bring it closer to make it feel like it belongs together. And also, just for the thumbnail, I think it would probably even work better in horizontal orientation, because it would make the whole piece breathe a little bit more. But of course, you would want to probably match the height of this font here. So then for your piece, the birdie itself, I noticed that actually in your other pieces as well, it might be because of the monitor, but it feels a little bit too contrasty, but it's very slight. So I did a quick edit here on the right side here, and I basically boosted the blacks a little bit, so they are a bit brighter. And also another thing is that I noticed in when I had the image on my 4K monitor that everything is super detailed, which is great. But when everything is in focus, it's really hard to find some rest areas for your eyes. So for this reason, I think it would be nice to get some depth of field. I tried to fake it here in the edit here, but it's not super easy to do in Photoshop. But I think it gives you the idea. By the way, I really like the background here, because I quite often notice that people put very low resolution background and then don't focus on it. But all of these small details here are really nice. So then for the textures themselves, I noticed one thing, and I can get this feeling that the metal feels like it's floating on top of it. So what I mean by that is, if you imagine that this red line here is basically the metal layer, this yellow line here is basically the paint peeling, and this is what you would expect. You would expect to have this empty area here. But what I'm really seeing here is that this metal part seems like it's protruding a little bit here, and it makes this sort of strange effect. And I think this is because the metal itself has a lot of height information, and this is what happens. So in general, I think metals don't tend to be this bumpy either. So I would really just smooth it out. And this would also create some contrast between the metal and the paint material itself. I also noticed that in the albedo of your paint material, you have a lot of noise. And this noise looks a lot like one of those basic grunges you get in Substance Painter. And I think that in general, you want to avoid making it feel like it looks procedural. So if you can detect some of those basic noises there, it's gonna feel procedural. So I would maybe bump it down. And also, I didn't notice this kind of thing in references either. So if you don't see it in the reference, I would say don't really add it unless you are sure it's going to work. All right, so another thing I think would be nice is if you added some more unique elements in the textures themselves. For example, a label here, some white drops, maybe some unique scratch here, or perhaps some grayish stain. It doesn't matter, you can be very creative with this. But if you add this sort of stuff, it's going to make everything look a lot more interesting. Because right now you have basically just the paint material and the metal material, and those are nice materials. You've done a great job on them, but it becomes a little bit too uniform. So it's nice to break it up with some smaller details like this. So I would say that overall, a really nice portfolio. And main thing is the tendency for a little bit higher contrast and noisiness. So perhaps I would stick even more to the references you are using for the texturing, and especially on the birdie, I noticed some of that. And yeah, this is it. And I'm going to give it back to Niels again.
Thank you. There we go. So the next portfolio is Yahid. Again, a wide variety of assets. We see acid. We see substance designer materials as well. Again, old projects, quite a lot of them that don't reflect your current skill anymore. I think that's kind of a general theme in a lot of the portfolios in general. For example, this one has been 2 years ago, and it's no longer a par with the rest of your portfolio. So try not to get too attached to the artworks that you make, but try to scratch some of them that no longer reflect your current skill. I'm going to be focusing on this asset, for example. You mentioned that this asset right here, the high power laser fire control system, is a game ready asset. Yep, here we go, game ready. Scrolling through it, you also have a wireframe render, which is nice. It shows the recruiters your wireframes and know that you can optimize. However, there's certain parts that could be optimized a lot more, some parts that could be baked down easily. Especially this knob here adds quite a bit of polygons for very little detail. It barely adds anything to the silhouette right here, but you've put it all into geometry. So don't be afraid to bake down certain parts, because this is not adding a ton of geo to it. Same here, you have quite a bit of small bevels. I don't know how visible it is on stream, but you can see there's a lot of small bevels here, and that's not really super game ready. It could be optimized a lot more. Stuff can be baked down. So try to keep that in mind, especially when you're posting the wireframe, because this is what recruiters are going to notice, and leads as well, reviewing your portfolio. Then about the UVs are quite good. However, there's some parts that can be optimized a bit more, can be straightened here. These curved parts, circles, you can break up, cut them in a piece and straighten them as well. The main reason is aliasing, or however you pronounce it. If you have a square and you triangle, you're basically going to get a pixelated edge. So you want to try and avoid that as much as you can. So this one, for example, can be straightened. All of these circles can be straightened as well, just to optimize that back a little bit more. Then we got some nice details on the references that I found. I tried to look up the exact same model. And I know for certain parts, especially for attachments like these, the textures might not always be super interesting. But then again, if you look closely, there's some nice breakup in the roughness here. Maybe some of that coating got peeled off, exposing some more of that metal or whatever material it is underneath. Would be nice to see it in your model as well. We got some scratches. I know you got them here as well, but they could be a little bit more visible. One thing I've noticed from your renders is that your model seems quite shiny compared to the reference. I would try to make it a little bit more rough, match the coating on there a little bit more. And the noise on it is a little bit too harsh as well. It's not as visible in the references. I could be looking for more references, but that's the only ones I found. So you can add some details that are missing on your model as well. Some dust buildup in certain parts, like the crevices here. You can clearly see the dust buildup here, but I'm not seeing anything like that on your model. We have some localization of the dust around this part, but not a whole lot. There might be something going on here, but it's not that visible, right? So you can really push that to help sell the realism just a tiny bit more. As well as the scratches, for example, on the knob, you can add some of that in there as well. Just try to break up the general feel of your acid, get some more shiny parts in there, some rougher parts, some color variation, because right now it's just black and white basically. So you can add some brown dust or some dirt buildup as well. And then you have one render, which is nice, although they're on a white background. You have one render, and that shows a little bit more of that color variation, a little bit more of that roughness variation. But then when I scroll down, suddenly the lighting changed. I don't see any contact shadows anymore. It's like you made one render nice and then you suddenly gave up on it. And that really doesn't do your asset justice if you look at this one render compared it to the other ones. So try to keep your lighting setup kind of uniform, your renders as well, because this is a nice render, and then you just keep on decreasing it. It becomes flat and you start losing all the details. So you have some nice stuff going on, but try to keep it up to date as well. The contrast in pieces is getting a little too strong, and try to experiment with your renders a bit more as well, especially your thumbnails. Most of the times your assets are floating in a void. I'm guilty of that as well. Sometimes I just put a render on a flat white or black void and call it a day, but it doesn't really do your work justice. Same for your renders. The revolver is a great example, by the way, of a nice thumbnail, a nice render. Kind of reminds me of a Counter-Strike 2 skin, the R8 revolver. It's a nice render. You have some stuff going on, some extras, but I'm not seeing that in any of your other work. Most of the times they're floating in a void. But then this one, try to apply the same principles to your other works as well. That'll really do it justice. So yeah, I'm mostly drawn to that piece in your portfolio, so it doesn't show the full art, and it has some nice, interesting elements to it. So I'm going to hand it over back to Robin.
All right, thank you, Niels. let me get back to the mirror board. And so my next person is Emory. So first thing I really noticed is that all of this blue, all of this uniform blue feels a little bit daunting to me. And it's not so easy on the eyes, at least that's how it makes me feel. So I tried doing a really quick edit here, and I basically added this vignette here, which is like a gradient around the corners here. And I think that this makes it feel a lot more, calming on the eyes, and also focuses a bit more on the actual assets themselves. So this is something I also noticed in your renders themselves. I'm gonna get to it actually later. Let's go in order first. So one thing I also noticed is that this header here feels a little bit out of place. So I would really just take one of your really cool pieces and place it here. And I think this would look a bit nicer. So also perhaps you could add some description here. I don't think it's very necessary, but it's going to make the portfolio feel a little bit more whole as a, yeah. One more thing is that I noticed these three last pieces here feel out of place as well. I think that these are obviously outdated, and I will just remove them and keep just the new stuff there. So back to the gradients I was mentioning before. I tried doing a quick edit again. So I added a bit of gradient to the background, which to the sides, it's a little bit darker, and in the middle, it's a bit brighter. Also, the whole image is a little bit brighter, and I think that this actually makes it pop a little bit better and makes the asset more justice. So, for example, what you can also do is you can find some similar posts. For example, these posts from Deathloop, I think that they have quite similar stylization. So this is a great inspiration you could draw from. So this is also what I did, is I took at some other posts, and this is what I noticed, that you are missing some of those gradients, and overall the images are a little bit too dark. One thing I also noticed in general in most of these assets is that you tend to have some little bit strange dirt effects here that really don't make sense. So what I would do is, for example, for a vehicle, I would try to find a really good reference. And if you have some sort of specific dirt like this, I would just try to replicate it, because this here to me feels a little bit just like some random brushstrokes that don't make that much sense. But for example, in your piece here, I noticed these scratches here, and these actually feel really good to me. This is exactly what I would imagine would happen if this bug was flying somewhere in really narrow places, that this place is protruding a little bit and it would get scratched like this. So these sort of damages are great, but this doesn't really make that much sense. And same really applies for these scratches here. If you imagine how this thing would be used, some of these top scratches would not really appear there easily. Even though you have some flying robots here, I don't think that they would really be flying like near the top of this surface, so they would not really appear there. Whereas here on this bottom part, these scratches make a lot more sense. So I would really try to think about the storytelling overall, and when you are creating some of these specific details, think if they actually make sense to be there. So yeah, I would say that overall it's a very nice portfolio, a lot of nice and clean pieces. So I would just clean it up of the old stuff, try to make the pieces pop a little bit, and this can be even done just in Photoshop. It doesn't have to be even, in the renders themselves. but it's always better to do it in the renders actually. And yeah, this is it for me. I'm gonna give it back to Niels again.
Thank you. There we go. Next up, I'm gonna butcher this name. I'm sorry. We have Masi, something like that. Looking at your portfolio, you have a wide array of props and environments as well. Some pretty cool stuff. The last 4 pieces, especially, are really nice. Good quality stuff, and I love the environment with the little galaxy showing here. And all the other stuff, I again feel like it doesn't reflect your current skill level anymore, and it's quite outdated. It's quite old as well. If we look at the pieces here 5 years ago and compare this to your latest 4 pieces, and the contrast becomes very clear. If we're looking at this door is a great example of a very nice asset. It has all the elements that I like to see in a prop. It has roughness variation, height variation, albedo variation where it makes sense. Also, the wood grains, the different planks go in different directions, which is very nice. You got some other details in there as well. Worn parts near the bottom of the door, which is a very nice detail to add as well. The only thing that I'm left wondering, I've read somewhere that the door will be openable, or you can open the door in like 6 different ways. So maybe that's why that the little handle is quite low. If you would imagine a person, I think he would have to crouch down to open the door. But maybe that's one way of opening it, since there's at least 6 different ways. But the door, very nice asset. I'm going to focus a little bit more on this piece here, the machine. Let me open it up for the viewers here. So it's based on a concept. You try to recreate it, and I think you did a pretty good job. But there's some notes that I'd like to address, especially the textile density. So since this machine is pretty big, I'm guessing you had some issues reaching a good textile density. It becomes very noticeable on the close-up shots here, which seems to be a low textile density. You could optimize your UV, mirror some parts, make sure you're using trim sheets and tiling textures to definitely reach that textile density. And since this is a pretty big asset, I'm sure you'll be seeing some parts close up as well. Right now, I feel like everything is fairly rough. It has the same roughness value. Would be nice if you break it up with some more shiny parts, like this part here, taken from a reference. On the renders, it seems pretty rough. Would be nice if you introduce some more variation in roughness and metallic values as well. Would have loved seeing some more dust and grime and crevices where it makes sense, where it gets handled the most. Some large scale variation here. You can see that there's a slight gradient. Maybe the person used to grab it with his hands there a lot, and then you would get some discoloration from the grease of your hands. So in some parts that would make sense. Maybe near the handle, get a little bit darker from the grease of your hands as well. Same here, grease near items that can move, since they need to get lubed so they move smoothly as well. Another part I would like to see, I know you've been following a concept, but I'm missing some of the details that make it feel functional, make it feel real. There's no labels, for example, no rivets, no numbers, no welds. You got some bolts here and there, but right now the asset doesn't really feel functional. So adding some of these labels here, some of these bolts, some rivets, some nails, some screws, basically some text around the buttons and stuff as well, so the people handling the object know what they're actually doing. I know this isn't in the concept, but you can take the liberty to make it as nice and realistic as you can. Presentation could use a slight diorama. Right now, again, it's floating in a void. It's standing on a shadow catcher, yeah. But then if you look at your locomotive, for example, you got some fog going on. You have a diorama. You have some train rails. You got a person in the back showcasing the scale. and it would be nice to see the same thing, even if it's just some mega scans. It would be nice to see it in here as well. I missed a note here. Some of the paints, you could add some normals, some thicker, sloppy paint job on there as well. That would help us sell the acid. So overall, you got some great pieces and a great progress throughout the year. The portfolio could be a little bit more up to date again to reflect your current skill level. The door, as I said before, is a great piece, and I'm sure if you were to redo some of the assets, like the older ones, they would look so much better. So I'm going to give it back to Robin right now.
Thank you, Niels. So getting back to Mirrorboard. And the next person is going to be Ludmila Andrushenko. So first thing I noticed is that you often start your portfolio posts with a video. Personally, I think that it's better to start with an image and then you want to have your video. And this is also for a reason that psychologically, sometimes it can be a bit hard to play a video, especially if you put a YouTube link. For example, what I had to do is I had to play the video. So I had to click, then I had to go to settings. I had to change the quality because for me it was actually very low quality. And then I had to change it manually, and only then I could actually see the video. So it actually took some effort for me. And psychologically, you probably want to see first the image, and then you want to see if you actually want to go through the hassle of playing the video. But having said that, I think it's actually better if you were to use the default ArtStation player itself, because this one would actually play by itself. And what you could also do is you could just make a loop video, so it would feel like it's endless and it would have no disruptions. I would also avoid doing just pure zooms with the camera, because this is going to be feel a little bit too cheap. So I think it's better to actually have some movement in your camera. You could also perhaps animate the light slightly as well, if that makes sense for the particular scene. I also noticed that you have some sort of blank space here. I think you wanted to probably separate these references here at the bottom, but I would say that this does not really work, because my first thought was that something forgot to load here. So I would just remove this. And also in your video, you have this clip with some information at the end, and I would really delete this, and especially, or if you want to keep it, I would make it really quick, because right now the animation is very slow and it takes so much time to actually see the text. I think it took like 5 seconds from a 20-second video. So this is too much. And anyway, it would be better to have the endless video, as I mentioned before. Also, in some of the shots, I noticed that you have depth of field, which is nice, and some of the shots were missing it. For example, this one here. And what this causes is that it feels a little bit too unfocused, and this is a little bit too distracting. My eyes actually don't know where to look at, because everything is just in focus. So I would keep the depth of field there. Also, you have some breakdown here. It's nice to have your breakdowns, but personally, I think that it's not that interesting to have metalness, roughness, transparency, and the normal. It's nice to have there, but it's not necessary. But if you are doing a piece for a game as a game asset, then you want to include the topology. But in this case, the topology is just this small little piece here, and I cannot really see it. But even from this small piece, I can actually see that it's not really well optimized for an actual game. For example, here, this part, you might want to merge some of these loops on this bottom part here, where the radius is getting smaller. I also noticed that you actually did this on your other piece, right here. You are merging some of the loops where the diameter is getting smaller. Another thing I noticed is, for example, this little ball here. It feels a little bit too dense for how small it is. In general, if something is small, it just doesn't need that many polygons. Also, for example, here is just a loop that doesn't really contribute to the silhouette, so this could be completely deleted. And also, some of these little cylinders here, those just look very dense as well. But it's a little bit hard for me to see because, as I said, it's just a small sliver of this whole image here. So yeah, basically the same thing I noticed in your other post is that here you have some loop that doesn't make sense. This is perhaps a little bit too dense. Here, some of these loops could be deleted as well. But also in this one, I noticed that the spacing between these loops is not consistent. This is something you would want to make even. And the next thing is, I actually noticed that in your other post, you actually do this, but for this post here, I didn't notice it as much. So what you want to do is, if you want to make your textures very interesting, you want to make a lot of unique elements. So I found actually this reference here, which I think is really good, because I think this is an actual photo of an object, but it looks a little bit like the albedo preview you can get when you switch the channel in Substance Painter. So if you were to do that for your asset, this is basically how you would want the albedo to look. As you can see, there is a lot of different variation in the colors. Here you have some red scratches. Here you have some yellowish scratches. Also some random text here. Here is another, unique element here as well. All of these places are very unique, and even if they are very subtle, and you layer a lot of them, it's gonna bring a lot of complexity and make the asset look very interesting. And yeah, this is it. So very nice artwork, very nice portfolio. And you only have 2 pieces there, and this is actually a good thing because it shows me that you chose your best pieces, the strongest ones, and it brings some focus. And yeah, really, the things I mentioned, but mainly if you are doing the game optimized meshes, it would be really beneficial to show that they are actually game ready. And now I'm going to give it back to Niels again.
Thank you. All right, next up is Yousef. I think I'm pronouncing that one correct for this time. Yousef has a lot of artworks, and I like that you've split it up into all environment props and your substance designer material. So let's take a look at all of them. You have quite a lot of substance designer materials, some environments and props, but I feel looking at the thumbnails that, again, it's very inconsistent. Let me go to mirror here. You're using the Unreal Engine. This one is smaller, then suddenly you're using a big one. Then you're using a different variation of the same logo. The same goes for your substance designer ones. Here in the corner, you're just using the small logo. Then you're using a smaller one. Then you go bigger. Again, try to keep it consistent. This is going to be pretty nitpicky, but that's what the recruiters look at as well, the consistency. So if you can make your thumbnails consistent, then they're going to think like, oh, this guy knows how to work consistent, and his work will reflect that as well. Again, you have quite a lot going on. I really do like your substance designer materials. They're very, very nice, very on point. But you have some pieces that are no longer up to date, like this drill old here, your dream city 5 years ago. If you compare that to, for example, this piece, doesn't really, again, reflect your skill anymore. And this is like a general feedback for a lot of people. Try to just put the best of yourself out there, because that's what's going to get looked at. And if I look at it, then recruiters definitely going to look at your older pieces, your less up-to-date pieces as well. You seem to put like a heavy emphasis on materials and building environments, the lighting and stuff. And those are really nice and show that you have a good understanding of designer and like the technical aspect of it and the creation of materials. However, looking at some of the environment pieces, which are really nice, it leaves me wondering how much is done with custom assets. I know you put it in the description somewhere that you tried to focus on lighting and that you used some Megascan assets. But I feel right now that your asset creation is your weakest point, and all the assets are quite old. So I don't know if you upped your skill level on assets alone. Like your latest environment, the Himalaya, you're doing an asset showcase. Let me bring that up. This is the Himalaya environment, like super nice. The lighting is super nice. The mood is super nice as well. And down here, you're doing an asset showcase, but I'm not sure if you've made these yourself or you didn't, because in the software used section, I don't see anything that tells me that you created these assets yourself, except for Quixel Megascans. So I don't really see the point, if they are Megascans, to put it in there if you didn't create them yourself, because that doesn't really show me or the recruiter anything special. As well as some shots that don't give me any information, like this nanite view doesn't really give me a lot of information. Some screenshots of your viewport doesn't really tell me much as well. Maybe it's to showcase your project, your process, but you can do that in a GIF as well, which I'm sure you've done somewhere. So that's kind of like the overall general feedback. In the presentation of some pieces, you're putting information. As I said, I don't really see the point of. Now I'm going to focus on this environment here. This scene is super nice. I think it got featured in the Unreal Engine video as well. You put that on there. That was super cool. I love the lighting. I love the mood. There's a nice contrast going on between the warmly lit areas and that little cool shadow here. And my eyes get guided along the path to the stairs where there's some brighter elements, some fog. And you break up the verticality nicely. Like there's a lot of verticality going on. But you break it up nicely with these ropes here, these cables. So that's pretty cool. A nice amount of clutter as well, making it feel lived in. However, some of it feels a little bit too manually placed. Like you have one trash bag here. If you zoom in further, there's one here. The quality isn't there, but you get the idea. There's one pot here, some sandbags, one like flower pot here, one here. Would be nice if maybe some bags are stacked next to each other. Some pots have fallen over, like exposing some dirt, some broken pieces. Would help sell it a lot more. So for this portfolio review, your latest artworks are pretty dope. Artistically, they're super nice. I'm just left wondering how an environment would look like with your current skill in assets, since all of the assets are pretty old for now on your portfolio. If you could bring up the quality of the assets and combine that with your already existing skill in environments and lighting, chef's kiss. Perfect. I'm gonna bring it over to Robin.
All right, thank you, Niels. So let me get back real quick. All right, so the next person is Matthew Huang. And for your portfolio, what I noticed is that you have a lot of improvement in your latest two posts, which is a great thing. But again, this indicates that perhaps you might want to consider removing some of the older posts. I would probably definitely remove at least the last two on, which also means that this header here would make sense replacing with some of your newer stuff as well. Also, I noticed you don't have any About You section. Again, it's not really necessary, but I think that it would make the profile a little bit more complete. So another thing is, I think I mentioned it in the previous portfolio review, is that for this piece, I'm missing a little bit more of those unique elements. For example, I noticed that you have some of these unique elements here, and these are really great, but I would like to see a little bit more. So for example, here you have unique element here, and I think that stuff like this makes textures look, interesting. So if you add more of it, it's gonna look even more interesting, the whole object. But of course, you don't want to overdo it. It's always all about the balance. I also noticed that you have some imperfections here, and this is really great. This is what you want to do in the modeling stage as well. But for example, in this, I don't know what this part is called, but I noticed that it's a little bit too straight. If you look for some references, you can see that, for example, this one is very crooked. It's thinner than this one, so it doesn't make sense that it would be as crooked as this. But I also found a reference of this one that is a lot more similar, and probably you might have used this reference as well. And even here, you can see some bending here, and that all of these lines are not straight at all. So this is what you want to replicate as well. And again, the more references you find, the more sort of unique elements you can see. So what I like to do is I like to find a lot of references and pick and choose different elements that I think are interesting, and then these elements would be interesting in my textures. For example, here you can see just some random specks of dust. Here is some random very unique stain. And what's important is about all of these is that they only appear in some places. Like these kind of stains you see only here, and not really that much here, for example. And these often tell a story of how the object was used. So always also think about stuff like this. For example, also this part here is very scratched out. So how this happened probably is that the person would be holding the camera a lot by this place, and for this reason it would get scratched out like this. And also I noticed that there is this logo here, which you don't have in your piece. And actually I was thinking that this place is a little bit too empty. And if you were to have these scratches here and the logo, I think that it would help balance out the textures a little bit. One more thing I noticed is, and this is actually quite common, is that you don't have much dust here. If you imagine how the references you gather are usually captured, is that these are usually some old items that the person maybe perhaps cleans before taking the photo. So all of the dust would be removed. So this is actually something you would not find in the references. But I think it would be nice adding this regardless, because if you are making such an object, it would probably be used in a real environment, and it would make sense to have similar effects. So I think that some dust in these crevices here would make a lot of sense. I use my own artwork as an example. Right here in these crevices, you can see some nice dust gathering here. And I think exactly this would be nice to have in your piece as well. Also, for your other piece, this is pretty nice. And what I noticed compared to the concept you were using is that the proportions are a little bit different. In the concept, the focus is a lot on the top part. The top part is also a little bit bigger, and compared to this vertical part here. So this is one thing you might want to focus on, because this is the focal point. Also, this is related to the lighting itself. In the concept, you can see that the lighting is focused on the top part as well. So here you can see it's the brightest, and as it goes down, it becomes darker and darker. So this is going to bring your eye straight to the focal point right here. And in your piece, you can see that everything in terms of lighting is the same brightness, basically. And also, one more thing is that in realistic artworks, you want to add some imperfections. It's especially for CGI because everything is straight by default. So you have to add this sort of imperfections. And when you're doing stylized artwork, I would say that this applies twice. You have to emphasize it even more. So what you can see here is that none of these things are really straight. You have some slants here, in these panels here as well. The whole image is actually tilted slightly, so this is also giving it some sort of mood. And here as well, this top stuff is quite crooked, and all of these planks here as well. Whereas yours is a little bit too straight, so I would definitely try to play with that as well. And one more thing is that I noticed the background itself feels like you didn't put as much effort in it as you did in the main piece. And I think it shows. For example, these trees feel here a little bit too plain. And also, it's probably because of the setting. It looks like the background part doesn't even have really any shadows, and it looks a little bit out of place. So I would I would put more effort into the background as well, because it's, after all, part of the piece. And yeah, this is it. Really cool artwork. So remove some of the older stuff, as I mentioned, keep only the strong pieces, and try to focus more on the details, imperfections, which tell a story. It's all about finding balance. And yeah, this is it. I'm going to give it back to Niels for the last piece.
So, last but definitely not least is Tanawat. I'm sorry. You got 3 pieces. I can tell that you're a 3D artist student and you're interested in game environment and prop creation, and that shows as well. Your thumbnails are pretty consistent, except for maybe you're missing the Unreal logo. Personally, I don't really put any logos of the software; it just takes away from your overall thumbnail. You got the Gothic Dungeon 3D environment, which is a very nice piece, but I'm only going to be focusing on one, which is this one. You got the realistic headphone prop, which is a very nice asset. The only thing I can say about this one is maybe try to find some references of like headsets that are just a tiny bit more worn and used. Right now, it feels a little bit too new. Usually, worn stuff is just a little bit more interesting to look at, but definitely a very solid piece. And this is the piece I'm going to be focusing on, which is the cyberpunk techno ramen bar environment art. I'm just going to scroll through it real quick. And some of the notes that I put is that I would have loved seeing a little bit more life to the surrounding areas. Right now, it feels a bit dystopian, as if it was just placed there randomly. It doesn't have a lot of life to it, the surrounding areas. So, like this part here and the background, like Robin mentioned also, even though it's just a background, the surrounding areas could use a little bit more love to help the entire scene or that little piece here feel more alive. A bit more variation of the scene could definitely help. Right now, you have quite a lot of assets already. You have some bottles, some chopsticks as well. But I can see the repetition in them. Like this one is the same as all of these, and the same that are all in the sink, and you're reusing the same asset, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it takes away a bit of that realistic feeling to it. You can maybe try to create a different texture for the same acid, remove some of the chopsticks, like a different acid or a different model. Right now, it just feels a little bit too uniform. Maybe you could add some napkins, whatever people use at a ramen shop in the cyberpunk setting. Chopsticks just lying on the counter, a menu. Just think of people, what people would need, like salt, pepper, napkins, toothpicks, a menu, like I said before. As I said, a lot of repetition, and you have some normal stuff going on here. Not sure what this is, but this seems to be like the normals in your low poly. Maybe some slight issues in there, especially when you zoom in close. Like you have one render that only shows this, and then you're really making your imperfections quite visible. Also with like variation, I mean like more variation in like stains in here. Maybe some more dishes, some glasses, make it feel more alive. The floor feels very clean compared to all of the rest. Maybe some breakup, maybe some decals, some acids laying on the floor, some chopsticks that have been fallen over, some more trash around this particular area here to help sell that realism. This render, I love. This is a really nice render. You got the electrical boxes, the fuse boxes. This is very cool. One thing I've noticed though is in your renders, you have AC units, but they're all outdoor AC units. So you have an outdoor on the top, you have an outdoor in here, and you have an outdoor at the back. But usually AC units, this is the AC unit, outdoor unit, but the cold air needs to come out of something, which is the indoor unit. And I'm not really seeing any of those. So it would be nice if you added that one to give function to the outdoor ones. Would have maybe opted for a different counter as well. Right now it's like, I think it's a granite. From a distance, it feels very wet almost, very noisy from a distance, very cloudy. Maybe you could have opted for a wooden one or like a steel one, just to get rid of that noisy feeling. Again, the counter doesn't seem like there's a lot of cooking going on here. What really sells an environment is make it feel lived in, like people are actually using the scene, like eating there in that cyberpunk environment. But overall, it's a pretty cool piece. It only needs a couple more assets to make it feel alive, as I said. So overall, it's a very solid portfolio, but try finding a little bit more references for your environments to make it feel lived in. The headphones are a really solid prop, proving you can recreate an asset from a certain reference. And there's a bunch of stuff that we said here, just Robin and I, that is very generalized as well, like the thumbnails, getting rid of some pieces that don't reflect your current skill level anymore. So try to apply that to the portfolio in general. So that was it from my side. I think Gregory is going to take over right now. There you go, the thumbs up.
I appreciate you, Niels. Thank you so much. Robin, thank you as well. Both of you did a fantastic job, and a few compliments thrown your guys' way in the chat as far as how thorough you were and for the great advice. So thank you both so very much for your contributions here today. Obviously, the community appreciates it, and this is going to be posted up on YouTube for people to review later. And I'm sure a lot more people are going to have a chance to look at this and are really going to benefit from it. So thank you both so very much. This was a great example, folks, of the type of feedback that these gentlemen tend to provide, both of whom are artists for us in art production at Sierra Division, and also now are instructors with us at Sierra Division Academy. If you're interested in either of their courses or want to just know a little bit more about them, you're welcome to take a peek at academy.sierradivision.com. Just take a quick peek at their texturing courses if you're interested. But that being said, this was a tremendous pleasure, and this was a lot of fun to be able to offer to the community. A big thank you to all of you who are in attendance today. Big thank you to those of you who are watching this after the fact. I hope you found it beneficial. And a tremendous thank you to Mr. Jonas Runegard and JROTools community for being open to us to be able to offer something like this. This is super cool. And it's one of our goals to be able to give back to the community as much as possible to new and aspiring artists who are looking to rise up and kind of establish themselves, or maybe even just hobbyists who are looking to develop skills, whatever it may be. We want to be here for you to provide that feedback to help you take your skills to the next level. And so I want to keep this short and sweet. No reason to lecture you all. And so thank you again so much. Behind the scenes, Jacob, Stephanie, Vic, thank you for the behind the scenes help. And from everybody at Sierra Division and Sierra Division Academy, thank you, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. From Mr. Gregory Robb, myself, thank you. Have a good one, and I hope to see you around. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Take care, guys.